Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second night of the Columbia Springs Beaver Bash. My name is Kylie, and I'm the Community Engagement Specialist here at Columbia Springs. If you haven't been to our site before, I really encourage you to visit. It's just off of Evergreen Highway in Vancouver, Washington, and it is so beautiful, especially this time of year when it's sunny and dry and warm. So please come out. For those of you who don't know Columbia Springs, we essentially help tens of thousands of children and their families to find belonging in and love for nature. We build a community of lifelong learners and land stewards through our educational opportunities, walking trails, events, and workshops, which are open to all. I think that there's really something for everyone at Columbia Springs, and I hope that we see you here on our trails soon. To learn more, please visit us at www.columbiasprings.org. So now I'll tell you about tonight's expert in our Beaver Bash. And we have Amanda Keasberry with us. I'm really excited that we have joining us tonight. A little bit about Amanda. She has a background in environmental science and forest ecology, and she didn't grow up in Portland, though she fell in love with Portland when she traveled here one time. But she started in Alabama. She went to the University of Alabama for her undergraduate and graduate studies, and moved here as soon as she was done with school. So Amanda's been working as the Science and Stewardship Manager for the Cascade Forest Conservancy for the past 4 years, and she, I think, is really a beaver expert in her field. So now that you know a little bit about us, I encourage you to tell us about you. We'd love to hear in the chat where you're watching from tonight. And with that, I'll pass it over to Amanda. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kylie. Happy to talk about beaver whenever I can. And thanks for deeming me an expert. It definitely didn't start off that way. As she said, my background is in environmental science and forest ecology. Never really had much to do with wildlife, but I kind of came on board to this position with this project just being in its infant stages, and so I had to quickly become a beaver expert. So I feel like I know quite a bit now, but there's definitely more to learn always. So yeah, I'm with Cascade Forest Conservancy. We work out in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest and the surrounding areas. Obviously, forests and streams and wildlife don't stop at the boundaries, so we're not going to either in terms of our restoration and conservation work. So this is a little funny little postcard thing that I made. We had a gala a couple years ago, I guess our last in-person one, and one of our auction items was for folks to be able to adopt a beaver, and so that got them the ability to name a pair of beavers. So this is what I ended up sending to the folks that won. So this was the pair that they named Cornelia and Gifford. So yeah, I just wanted to, not a lot of people got to see it, so I wanted to show it off because I probably spent way too much time making it to show to people. So anyway, just a little more about Cascade Forest Conservancy before I get into beavers and beaver relocation. Like I said, we mostly work in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, and we work to protect and sustain the forest, the water, the wildlife, and the communities through conservation, education, and advocacy. And as we do that, you know, we keep climate change in mind, and everything that we do, we want to, you know, mitigate those potential negative effects of climate change, obviously on a very localized level, but you know, that's kind of where we have to start with such a widespread global problem that we're facing. So we're doing what we can in our little corner of the world. And so a way to do that is with aquatic restoration. So even in a really wet area like the Pacific Northwest, you know, it's projected that we're going to see a lot of less precipitation, both rain and snow. So we'll likely be facing more drought-like conditions. So if we work now to restore or protect areas, these different aquatic systems, then hopefully when we start to see more drought-like conditions, these areas can hold up and water can stay in the system for longer. So there's a variety of techniques that one can use to help improve an aquatic system, and that can be on one side of the spectrum of like very detailed, like, engineered log jams that cost millions and millions of dollars. So what you're seeing here is an aerial view of a log jam that's probably about 1,000 square feet, where, you know, large logs were pounded in like a very exact and precise location, and then other logs were woven in, and then there's backfill. And so that's usually done on like major waterways and rivers. Then you can like a beaver dam analog, where as a human you get to think like a beaver and build a dam, and kind of the same idea as the log jam, but way smaller scale. You're just putting in posts and then kind of weaving in natural materials that are around there to virtually make a beaver dam and get those benefits that a normal beaver dam would have. And then, yeah, the other end of the spectrum from log jams is using beavers themselves to just get them to do what they love to do and spend their time doing, building dams. And then there's kind of a cascading effect of, once they stick to an area, build their dams and inhabit the area, there's a lot of benefits that come from that. So we, the most we've done is definitely with beavers, even though it's, you know, a very new project for us. We're working on some beaver dam analog stuff, and we have some kind of in-stream wood projects going on. We're kind of pieces to the puzzle to larger projects, and working with a lot of partners on that. So aquatic restoration has kind of been some of our focus lately, even though we do a variety of projects from invasive species removal to riparian plantings. We do a lot of post-fire work. Yeah, we work in old growth ponderosa pine stands to help preserve them from potential wildfire. So we do a variety of things, but of late we're really stoked about aquatic restoration stuff. So yeah, so now I'll go on to, if my screen wants to go forward. I think it's because there's a video on the next screen, so it's operating slowly. Got the blue circle. What is going to be on the next screen is I was going to mention that Beaver Relocation as a form of an aquatic restoration technique is not a new idea. In the late 1800s, you know, beavers were almost extirpated from the landscape, and you know, after fur trapping kind of died down, you know, people are out on the landscape and realizing like, whoa, we took all those beavers and now it seems that wetlands have disappeared as well. And they're like, you know, this is kind of an issue. It affects a lot of things. So in the 1950s, they were starting to realize that, and we're like, hey, maybe we need to put more beaver on the landscape. And interestingly, in some areas like Idaho, they chose to do that by putting beavers in plains. So I just want to show a short clip of this video from the Idaho Fish and Game. They kind of had a big reintroduction strategy for muskrats, beavers, and martins. And yeah, the beavers they chose to do out of the plains. Yeah, so that's not how we're doing it these days, but I guess they thought that was appropriate back then. There was a disclaimer at the end of the video or in the comments that said that there was no animals injured in all of this, so that's great. It seems like they at least survived the drop. I find it funny though that someone was like recording on the ground, so obviously like they could get to that area, but for some reason chose the the plane route. So anyway, this has been a thought for a while. I kind of don't know what has happened between the decades from then till closer to now, but in the past, 10, 20 years, Beaver relocation has kind of really become this hot project, and a lot of research has been done on how beavers can improve aquatic ecosystems and how it can be helpful to get them back on the landscape and create more of these wetland habitats that are really important for a variety of species and even us as humans in downstream communities. So there's been a lot of research put into this, and it's still being done, and we're really happy to be a part of that research as well. So in different states, there's different regulations for being able to do a project like this. It's really popular in the Western states. For Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, they started a Beaver Relocation pilot program a couple of years ago. So we're a part of that. Me and another coworker were able to get our permits to relocate beaver. You just have to be over 18, have never committed a wildlife crime, and one other box to check. So it's really simple to actually get this, but you do have to have a facility and be able to house them, and go through the whole process, which is what I'll explain shortly. So it's not that anybody would just go and get one, but it's pretty simple, and we were able to get it and kind of expand our capacity because we were initially working with Cowlitz Indian Tribe in 2019. But then we thought we'd, get permitted as well, and so we could cover more area. So yeah, this is what we're a part of, the Beaver Relocation Pilot Program through WDFW. So yeah, before I get into kind of the process of the relocation project, oh no, that was weird. Get back on there. Sorry about that. So Ben Bitbrenner is probably going to touch on this a lot more next week, so I won't get into it too much, but just to kind of cover, why someone would even want to do a project like this. Why would you want to move beavers to different areas? I kind of mentioned like, oh, there's some benefits, so I just want to go over a few of those now. So, a beaver goes in, they decide to set up shop in an area, start to build their dams, and then there's kind of a variety of things that start to happen on the landscape. So first and foremost, there's kind of this creation of deeper and cooler pools. So not only is that beneficial for the beavers themselves because they use that as escape cover, it's also going to be beneficial for like fish and amphibians that need that type of habitat to lay their eggs in. Those deeper, cooler pools, and then there's also going to be kind of a more lateral spread of water. Beavers usually like to dam flat areas, so that water can really expand and form ponds, just a larger pond, not only deep but wide, and then also new side channels, which can be beneficial for species as well, needing that slower moving water. With all the water being kind of spread across, you're going to get saturation of the groundwater, and you're filling up the surface water. So hopefully that means that more water will stay in the system for longer during the season, or, as climate change brings about those drought conditions, that's what we're thinking, is that water will hopefully stay throughout those hot and dry seasons. The dams are also going to capture fine sediment, which is beneficial for anything downstream. So that's going to improve the water quality. Beavers eat a ton of forage, a ton of hardwoods. So removing those trees is going to help other trees thrive in that area, in that riparian area. Those trees that they cut down are going to end up in the water as in-stream wood. And there's tons of research showing the benefits of just, you know, large logs being in the water, because that helps create, you know, refugia and helps create these pools as well. And overall, just with all these changes, you're going to get an increase in abundance and biodiversity of the different plants and animals that are already near this aquatic ecosystem. Will kind of bring them more to that area. So again, this has been widely studied and shown that beavers can definitely have these effects in this type of ecosystem. So now I'm just going to kind of explain the whole relocation process. I think it's fascinating, and I've been there from the get-go of our project. So I've been at every one of these stages, and it's certainly a fun project to be a part of. So I'm just going to go through that with you guys. So first, we have to find suitable habitat for the beaver. They definitely have preferences, and we definitely don't want to just go drop them anywhere. So a good way to start that is doing a spatial analysis. So Gifford Pinchot National Forest is 1.3 million acres. So we weren't just gonna, you know, go drive and find a spot and hope for the best. We kind of needed to narrow down some locations and target some locations for us to go do field visits. So I did the spatial analysis just using some information that we had on like slope and channel width and average annual precipitation, if the river valley was confined or unconfined, so just kind of wider or more of a V-shaped channel. And so using that information just kind of picked up these hot spots of where good habitat might be. So that's not everything that beaver need by any means. So then from there, you definitely have to go out and do field visits. So that's what we did. Once we kind of narrowed down a list, we did a bunch of trips with project partners. We've also been out with dozens and dozens of volunteers and students to help us go check out these different locations to look at even more variables. So they have a lot of preferences, and there's definitely going to be more optimal habitat that they're going to want to stick around in. So yeah, things like stream gradient, they want a really low slope because they want to flood the area. So water is going to spread more easily with the lower slope. You want the stream flow to be fairly slow moving. So if they have to build their dam, they can't do that in a rushing creek. It's just not going to hold up. So slower moving water is better. And they can also choose a pond or a lake that isn't necessarily the water's moving. So that's a little an asterisk there for that one. So there doesn't have to be a flow necessarily, but that lake or pond will probably have flowing water. Stream depth, you don't want it so deep. You want it kind of partially deep. The ranking here is, you know, somewhere between over your sneaker and over high boots. This is definitely not super scientific, and it's all kind of relative, but filling out this is the Beaver Site Assessment scorecard, and so it kind of just gives us an idea of a ranking of each of these sites so we can, you know, narrow it down even more. So if they start to build dams, pools will be created, but it's ideal if there can be pools already there, because again, they use them for cover. So, you know, we're plopping them somewhere. They obviously don't have a lodge built for safety. So anything that they can use to protect themselves is good. You definitely want more of a muddy, clay, silty type of substrate, because they will dig into the sediment to create channels to get to their lodge and to get to different areas underground. You definitely want a sizable area, so they're kind of territorial and definitely want their space. So it's good to have about a 4,000 foot stretch of stream reach that has ideal conditions. There needs to be quite a bit of hardwood food. They eat a ton, and they definitely have a preference and favorite tree types. I'm actually trying with the beaver that I have in the facility now to kind of do taste testers and see what he'll eat, because at the location there's like a ton of vine maple. So I'm like, it'd be nice if he'd want to eat this, but that was definitely not his favorite, so that's not going to work. Other kind of herbaceous food, any kind of small grasses, shrubs, whatnot, are ideal because they'll eat that, and definitely aquatic vegetation as well. Again, the floodplain, we want it to be flat so it's easy to flood as opposed to a narrow channel. Other types of trees are great too. Conifers, they don't love to eat, but they'll definitely chew those down for dam building or lodge building materials. Also, we have this bonus round down here. Historic beaver use is ideal because that tells us that beavers lived there before, so there's got to be something good about this area. Maybe a not so good event happened to cause them to leave, but you know, in some areas we can tell it's been 10-20 years and all the conditions seem great, so maybe it's a good place to move them back into because they're obviously not getting up there on their own. Any kind of large woody debris that's in the river channel or stream channel is really good because, again, that's going to serve as refugia for them. And oftentimes there's pools associated with large woody debris. And we also don't want to see presence of other browsers or grazers like deer and elk because they too love the same hardwood species. So we don't want to put beavers in an area where they're going to have to compete with those animals to get enough forage. So anyway, that was a long description of that, but you know, that's what we're looking for when we're out there doing the site assessments to try to find the best spot. And, you know, and we're going to locations where it's also like beavers would greatly benefit from this area. Like maybe it's a spot that we've seen dry out a little bit over the summer. So it's like, okay, we could put them here. And if they build a dam, then they're going to help keep that water in the system for longer. So it's kind of like, where's good for beaver and where are they going to make a positive impact? So this is just a series of photos of some of this process. So this is me explaining the spatial analysis to some volunteers and kind of planning out our day. This is a site called Bear Prairie that it's one of these sites that dries out quite a bit in the winter. This is filled with water. And then once summer hits, you just get these like tiny pools and a little bit of a few channels running through it. And it has tons and tons of historic beaver evidence, but they're definitely not there now. So this is a spot where it's like, okay, well, if we got beavers back in there while there was water and they kind of dammed up the area again, perhaps this would be underwater all year round, which would be nice for everyone that uses it. This is a spot, really great channel, kind of had the right depth, the right width, but you can see that there's not a lot of hardwoods around, so this maybe isn't the best area. I think once we got further down, there was more trees, but you can see in the distance there, it's a lot more conifers, not as much hardwood. There is a lot of aquatic vegetation though, so that was a benefit. These are some volunteers that got really excited about finding historic beaver chew, but I'll also note that they're actually standing in the stream bed right now. So this is a spot where it dries out during the summer. It has obviously had beavers before. Actually, this site does currently have beavers. Beavers did move in on their own here. So this site's doing okay, but if they didn't have beavers, then this would also be like, okay, well, beavers have been here, site conditions are good. It's having trouble holding water in the system. Maybe we should get beavers back in there. Just going out with students. These students were really happy to find this beaver chew. This beaver chew is really fresh, so we kind of knew that beavers had been there fairly recently, so this would not be a good release location. Because that's another thing that I should mention. We're not releasing beaver where they're already beaver. We're trying to get beaver into kind of like the higher headwater systems where they're not getting to anymore for whatever reason, and then hopefully they'd kind of have, I hate to use this terminology, but a trickle down effect of where, you know, they would potentially set up shop there, but we'd keep putting like multiple families, and then they'd end up going back down into the watershed to kind of repopulate that area. So from there, we're going to narrow down our optimal release locations. And then before we do the release, we're going to collect some baseline data on the stream and surrounding vegetation at the release sites. So ultimately, we want to know what changes are occurring if the beavers do end up staying and damming the area. As we did all these measurements and tried to make it super technical, we were kind of realizing that, you know, the effects that we want to see, they should really be visible by sight. You know, what does it matter if a, you know, pond increases depth by like 2 inches? Like, that's not really going to do much. So now we're thinking, well, and we ended up getting a drone, so we can just fly a drone over these areas kind of pre and post beaver release to just visually see the changes that are being made, because those are obviously going to be impactful if we're seeing them with our own eyes. So we still go and collect all this data, but we'll see what happens later on when we go to analyze that data. Okay, so now that all that pre-work is done and we've found the optimal habitat, it's now time to acquire the beavers. And so to do that, and per the requirements of the WDFW relocation process, is that these beavers have to be causing some sort of issue, and that there can't be any other solution to the problems. So for example, people will give us a call and they're like, beavers are chewing down my trees. I don't like that, but I don't really mind the beaver being there. So the simple solution to that is just putting up chicken wire, and then the beavers won't chew down the trees. Issues can get a little worse if they've created dams and they're flooding areas, and I've heard from people where it's flooding over their driveway, they can't get to their house. So a little bigger issue, but the solution there could maybe be a flow device, which is this kind of low-tech thing that can be installed that just helps move the water to where it needs to be. And then if that doesn't work, then relocation is kind of the next step. And if relocation can't work, unfortunately, if you just want to get rid of one, call a wildlife trapper, wildlife services, they'll trap it, but then they euthanize it. So the relocation process kind of gives these beavers a second chance at life, and, you know, offers a chance to improve habitat out in the national forest. So it's really a win-win situation. And even if we release the beaver and, you know, they get eaten or something, like, at least that's kind of like circle of life situation, and someone benefited from the beaver as opposed to it just having to die from being at the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's how we get beavers. They have to be causing issues. Then we have an intake process. I just love this photo of the little snoot there. And then, yeah, and then they get to hang out in our holding facility. So we have a really modest facility. Some groups use fishery runs, empty runs at like salmon fisheries. That didn't work out for us, so we just kind of have this outdoor dog kennel situation. It's 5 by 15 feet. We only house one family at a time. So yeah, the requirements there, it just needs to be an enclosure. Temperatures need to stay cool. Ours is right by a river, so it's got cool temperatures. It's under trees. We have this shade cloth up there. They get a delivery of fresh hardwoods every day. They have to have a place to sleep, a little lodge. So again, it's just another pet kennel, travel pet kennel, and then access to clean water. So we just have a trough for them, and then we have to go and change out the water every day because they do make it pretty dirty, because that's where they use the bathroom. And all these stumps are just a little path for him to get up there. We've tried a variety of things. We started with a ramp, and every time we came to check on them, the ramp was just tossed to the side. We tried cinder blocks, which just isn't great for their little feet. The bottom of their feet are actually pretty sensitive, so didn't really love that. So we're trying this Stump Route this time, and this is a video from today or yesterday of our current resident. I was happy to see him use these and that it went well, so I'll just show you that real quick. He also is trying to not be seen by me. He's been quite shy, a bit scared. But I was happy to see that he used the stumps with ease. and he just plops in. So yeah, that's our little facility. So we usually wait until we have the whole family, because you're gonna have better success if you release the whole family together. So for this guy, we're waiting on his partner. So he just has to hang out. We have to go check on him every day. And then once we get his partner, we'll go release them. So next step, we put them in those kennels, load them up in our car. We get to the site, and then we have to carry them in. And that is quite the ordeal. In this photo, we had 3 beavers that we were taking in. But as you can see, there's only 2 kennels. That's because it was a mom and a dad and a baby, a juvenile. It wasn't a tiny baby. And the parents didn't want to separate, and they were 50 and 60 pound beavers. So that first kennel there is 110 pounds of beaver that we had to carry through the forest. It took 4 grown adults. We had to kind of forge a path to get to the site, and it was only about a 1/4 of a mile, but I think it took us about 2 hours to get through, because there was a lot of pinch points and tight areas to maneuver this box of beavers through. This was that release. This is the pair waiting for their child to join them. So yeah, we release them, let them go, kind of, stick around for a while, kind of just watch what they do. It's really fascinating to watch. This was a release last year. We got smaller kennels to make it easier to carry. So we each have a beaver in there, and it was kind of easy to carry it on our own. They were smaller beavers as well. I don't think that handle would hold up to a 50 or 60 pound beaver. Yeah, so then once they're released, we kind of have our monitoring protocol. And so we set up a series of wildlife cameras, which in theory is a great idea, but it doesn't always work, because if you have a place with a lot of side channels, like this place here, it's kind of hard to catch them. We usually definitely put one at the release site, because they do kind of, like right where we release them, because they kind of hang around there for a bit. And then we kind of just try to find all the possible areas they could go, but they can get around easier than we can. So sometimes we can't hit all those spots. So yeah, so we monitor them by getting the wildlife camera footage. We also just look for evidence. This was some huge logs that well, not huge logs, about 4-inch diameters, but that they chewed into quite a bit. And when the wood is really white, bright white like that, we know it's pretty recent. Beaver slides, kind of where they're entering and exiting the water. A beaver lodge. This is kind of hard to see here, but these sticks are piled up, and they kind of filled it in with mud. So they really set up shop there. And most recently, well, we started this last year, and then we're going full force this year. We're working with WSU, and WDFW is really leading the efforts to track the beavers, both with radio trackers and eDNA. So you can see, I think this bottom picture you can see better, this little yellow thing with the antenna. So that's a tracker that we put in the tail. And then this is Jesse, the grad student we're working with, using the antenna that picks up the frequency. So you can kind of triangulate their location. So that's been really fun and interesting to really track the movements of where they go once we release them. And the eDNA, this could be a talk on its own, but the eDNA, it's taking water samples to see if the beaver DNA is showing up, to hopefully be a future way for people, a way simpler method of monitoring to see if your beavers are still in the system that you put them in. So Jesse's master's and now PhD project is working to analyze, how long the eDNA stays in the system. Does it get trapped in like areas that have been dammed and there's like a bunch of sediment? So it's all really interesting stuff, and we're excited to be a part of that. So that'll hopefully be an easier way for everyone who works on this kind of project to be able to track their beavers. yeah, and with that, that's kind of the whole process beginning to end. And yeah, these are people that we've worked with, or funding sources. So, you know, we're working on federal land. So the Forest Service is a huge partner. Like I just mentioned, WSU, WDFW makes the relocation possible. We did a lot of work in the beginning with Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and some of our funding sources for this have come from WCS, the National Forest Foundation, and NIFWIF. So shout out to all those people supporting this project. And that's all I have. And that's our, yeah, there's Gifford there. He has been my favorite guest thus far. He definitely had the don't care about you attitude, and often slapped his tail when I walked by and sprayed me with beaver poop water. So.
Oh my goodness, so fun. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I think we have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
Let me see. First one, what does the inside of a beaver lodge look like?
Yeah, good question. There was actually this, I think it was up in Alaska, someone put a camera that streamed what was going on inside of the lodge, but then it messed up and they never set it back up again. It's very costly because you're having to use like Wi-Fi or cell tower to just constantly stream it in a remote location. But anyway, I mean, it's just an open area. They're pretty spacious because usually a whole family's fitting in there. There's usually a bunch of snacks in there. They'll bring snacks into there. They spend their time preening and wringing their fur out, because when they're in the lodge, they like to definitely be more dry. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like being inside of a tent, I would say. They even make sure to leave a hole at the top. So if you ever pass a beaver lodge in the winter, you'll see kind of the condensation coming from it, from all their breath and them being in there. So they know to have that kind of chimney installed.
Super fun, like a log cabin pantry.
Yep.
Okay, let's see here. Here's one. What is eDNA?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, again, like I said, it could be its whole presentation on its own. eDNA is environmental DNA. So it's taking water samples or sediment samples, and then there's a process in the lab that will extract the DNA from those different samples. So it's just things that have kind of like sloughed off on whatever creature you're looking for. So yeah, it could be from the poop, it could be from the fur. It's just these, you know, DNA particles that are suspended in the water, or sometimes they get trapped onto particles. And so depending on the type of sample you're taking, you can pick those things up. So it's actually a fairly new thing, and it's going to mean a lot for the scientific community in general, because it's going to make surveying and monitoring much simpler than any kind of like visual survey. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's super interesting. Almost like you think of cheek cells sloughing off really easily. You wouldn't think of it in water, I guess, but.
Exactly. And so, yeah, what's interesting is the WSU student was just telling me today, he's doing kind of like a side study of dammed and undammed sites. And there was a site that has a dam, but probably hasn't been used by beavers in like decades. And it came up positive for beaver being there through the eDNA. So it's like, is it trapped in the sediment? Like, since there's so many like chewed on sticks, is it like, you know, in there? So it's yeah, it's a very interesting subject, and yeah, learning more and more about it every day. Not just me, the like scientific community.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple more. We have several more here. Everybody has questions. That's awesome. Keep putting them in there. We have a couple about beaver families.
Yeah.
Beaver raise a family every year, and how many kits are in a beaver litter?
Yeah, they definitely can have families every year. They can start having kits, I think, by age 3. So it's usually at 2. When beavers are 2 years old, they leave the family and go off to find a mate. I'm not totally sure how quickly they start making a family after that, but yeah, and I think the kits can range maybe like 2 to 8 kits I feel like the lesser number is more average. But yeah, and beavers are monogamous. They mate for life, unless their partner gets killed or eaten. Then they'll go off and find someone else. But yeah, they love and respect the family unit, I guess.
Yeah, so this happens for how many years usually that they do
What?
this? How many years do they usually raise kids for?
I'm not totally sure. I feel like their average lifespan is like 15 to 20 years, and obviously they're probably not having babies that long, but I don't know. I actually don't, I'm not totally sure on that.
We stumped her.
Yeah, you got me.
Well, we can look that up afterwards. Okay, here's a few more. How big can beaver dams get?
Super big. Kylie, I shared this information with you, remember?
Yes.
There's a beaver dam that can actually be seen from space. What is it, 400 meters
I think
long?
it was 800.
800 meters long, yeah, thank you. Up in Canada, it's been, this generation after generation of beavers that have worked on this dam, I think since 1990, so 30 years old. So yeah, they can get pretty huge. It's really impressive.
Yeah, that was really interesting when you shared that with me. I couldn't believe that you could see a beaver dam from space.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay, couple more. What has been your favorite beaver encounter?
Oh.
Or couple,
Good.
if you can't choose.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just like any and every release. I don't know, you feel like you're like sending your kids off to college or something, and you're just like, oh my God, you're gonna do so great. It's just a really, special moment that I've not really had in any other aspect of my life. It's a very interesting project to be a part of, and it just, it's just a nice feeling. I feel like a Disney princess or something, you're just like, go off and birds are chirping, and it's just a beautiful day on the release.
Aw, that's so sweet. Okay, on a little bit of a more serious note here, are beavers an endangered species?
No, they aren't. There's not a good tally on how many there are these days, but it's definitely estimated that it's way below the numbers that it once was. So yeah, again, almost extirpated in the late 1800s because of fur trapping. And there's definitely areas where populations have rebounded, but what I can speak to best is the areas that I've been, and I've been to quite a few at this point. And yeah, there's tons of evidence of historic beaver, chew, whatnot. But there's definitely not a lot of current beavers. I mean, there are in some like concentrated areas, but I'd say for the most part, yeah, we see a lot more. This is where they used to be, and they no longer are. But no, they're not categorized as an endangered species, that's for sure. But they're definitely not anything that's gonna hurt from having more of them out in the wild. So that's kind of our thought process about that. There's some people that have, been in the area a lot longer than me and know the area a lot better than I do. And, they're like, there's plenty of beaver here. You don't need to be doing that. But at the same time, I'm like, what's it going to hurt? It's only going to potentially help something. So.
Yeah, really interesting. So if we're talking, oh, here we go. Here's another question. Did you plant the beaver in Giltet Lake, north of Bonneville Dam?
No. Yeah.
Gillette. Sorry, there was a typo.
No, yeah. Did you plant the beaver in it? Nope. No, we only have done stuff in Gifford Pinchot National Forest. So.
Gotcha. So maybe that's a naturally transplanted beaver, or who knows? Glad to hear that they're there.
Yeah, maybe people are doing going rogue and doing their own,
just dropping beavers out of planes.
yeah, who knows?
Absolutely. So you're all about beaver rehabilitation and relocation. So who do people call if they have a beaver on their property that is causing problems?
Yeah, I mean, you call us and then we'll kind of help you make that decision of what route to go to. Because like I said, yeah, it might be as simple as like, oh, I just don't want them eating my trees. So then, yeah, chicken wire is the fix. For the flow device stuff, there's groups that do that. There's one in Seattle and there's one in Southern Oregon, but I actually talked to the Southern Oregon guy recently, and he's training someone in Southwest Washington. So we'll soon have a Southwest Washington person to deal with beaver conflict in that way. So that's really exciting, because a lot of the times that is the solution, is just having that flow device to help keep the water at the level that you want it to be. And so, you know, unless people are just really hate the beaver, which I guess I've seen that as well, and just want them gone, you know, so we present people with options first, and if that's just not going to work, then we say, oh, we'll take them. But we've actually, I forgot to mention that most of where we get our beavers is actually Washington Department of Transportation, because they have a lot of beaver issues, as you can imagine. They get into their stormwater ponds, which are usually right next to roads, so that can cause pretty bad issues. And then another trapper is contracted by Weyerhaeuser, the timber company, who might have some beaver on their land that are causing issues. So we only this year are working with individual landowners, so that's kind of been a new experience. And yeah, with that, we just find a trapper to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny when thinking about Southwest Washington, I think, at least from my perspective, I haven't seen a lot of beaver, and it's kind of a special thing to think about them. And I know we have beaver here at Columbia Springs, but somebody is curious if you have advised us on our beaver problems. I haven't been here very long, so I'm not sure, but have you ever worked with Columbia Springs before?
No, I haven't actually, no. Are they beaver problems, you'd say, or?
I don't think we really have any problems right now. So we do have like a fence up around some of our culverts, because I think they have been dammed up in the past.
Right, yeah, so that's another kind of low-tech solution, or beaver deceivers, yeah, that will go around culverts to deter them from building, but a lot of the times they just end up building on the beaver deceiver, and then they still can stop some water and cause issues. So those aren't completely foolproof. Yeah, and beavers are so incredibly intelligent, and yeah, can sometimes very easily outsmart us. Like with the beavers that we're trapping now, we kind of had like the first day luck and got one immediately, and then it's been like a couple days, and we're but once they see those traps, they kind of know what's going on, and kind of stay away. So it's, yeah, all of this work is all dependent on the beavers. So we're just, you know, have to wait on them and see what they want to do, because that's what drives all the decisions. So it's a really interesting project in that way, of where we're just relying on what the beaver feel like doing.
Yep. It's up to the beavers. I know the ones here are super smart. I've only encountered one time, and it was just when it tail slapped at me when I was walking past. I was like, whoa, what was that?
Right, and that's usually when people see them, right, is because they see you first and they get scared and want to alert everybody else. So yeah, that's what a lot of people tell me about. Just, yeah, they're like, I always just see them slapping their tail. I'm like, yeah, it's because they don't like you. Sorry.
We love you, beavers.
Yeah, I know. I wish the little guy that's in my facility now would just understand that I'm trying to help him. It's like, he doesn't know that it was this or death, you know, like, if only he understood and knew that, yeah, we were trying to do good things for him and give him a nice, much larger home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, I think we're getting close to our time here, so I'll probably let everybody go in a second here, but we'll do another one of these presentations coming up next Thursday at 5:30 again, so I hope that we see you there. Thank you.
Yeah, Ben is a way more of a beaver expert than I am, so yeah, tune into that one. He's who I, you know, got all the information from to do the beaver spatial analysis, so Ben should have had a thanks on there too.
Well, thanks in advance, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Cool. All right. Well, have a great rest of your evening, Amanda, and thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Yep. Talk more soon. Bye,
All
everyone.
right, see ya. Bye.